I'm Melisa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. I'm delighted to introduce my guests today in the studio. Ida Thein, who is the CEO of Yayasan Tunku Abdul Rahman. She's also the co-founder of Closing the Gap Malaysia, as well as Kuhaneetha Bai, who is the 2022 AHAM-Tunku Scholar. And welcome both of you to the show. I'm here talking to you guys today because this year, 2025, is the 59th anniversary of the Tunku Abdul Rahman Foundation, Yayasan Tunku Abdul Rahman. I was hoping maybe we could start for those who may not be familiar, despite the almost 6 decades it's been around. What exactly does Yayasan TAR do, and how is it making an impact in the education landscape in particular?
Thank you so much for having us today as well, Melissa. So just as an introduction, the Tunku Abdul Rahman Foundation actually was set up by an Act of Parliament actually. So we're actually a stat body set up in 1966, initially with the goal of supporting aspiring young Malaysians to actually pursue higher education. So a lot of the first 40 plus years, I would say, close to 50 years, I would say, are pretty much focused on giving out loans, financial aids, and then starting from 2007 was when scholarships were first introduced in the foundation. But I think between then and I think 2019, a lot of the focus in the foundation has a lot been about merits-based scholarships, so thinking about giving the best and the brightest students to pursue their higher education. About the time 2019, which is when I joined, is when the foundation took a different direction altogether. We moved away basically and transformed the organization in a few fronts, but primarily number one is to think about refocusing our mandate on students from underrepresented backgrounds. So I wouldn't say B40 either, because I think we can go into that a bit more later on, but we're really much focusing on students who are of need, right? So this could be students from single parent household, from more underrepresented communities in Malaysia, and our goal is really to think about how do we enable them not just to access higher education, but to be able to achieve the kind of personal agency and transformation to build young leaders. Ultimately, the foundation was built in honor of our first Prime Minister, Tunku, and at the same time, the many foremothers and fathers that came before this as well. So the goal for us is still nation building, but through higher education and equitable access for young people.
How does that tie into the work that you were doing with Closing the Gap?
Oh, that's a very interesting one. So Closing the Gap is actually a program started by myself and a few of my co-founders back in 2016, actually. And the goal of the program was quite simple. We were just trying to, we noticed my co-founders were teachers at the time in the Teach for Malaysia program, and we noticed a lot of students who were not pursuing higher education after Form 5. A lot of times due to very obvious reasons like the lack of financial capital, but also for reasons such as limited understanding of the pathways after that, lack of self-esteem and personal confidence to pursue them. So that's why we started this program, which is a mentoring program, to support students for 2 years, to help them equip them with the skills, the knowledge, and the mindset, basically, to pursue higher education. So you can start seeing the commonality here.
Yes, I can see that. I'm connecting the dots.
Correct, correct. But one of the things we realized with Closing the Gap in our experience there for a few years is also that as much as you want to work on the personal transformation for students, you cannot ignore systemic barriers that students face, even if they try very hard to transform themselves, right? The clearest example would be, I think we're very common with the debate around merits versus needs-based, equity-based scholarship, or even financial assistance, and even entry into university. We find that for a lot of students that we work with, there are many, many reasons, usually out of their control, that may result in them perhaps not being able to compete on equal grounds with those from maybe more privileged or wealthy backgrounds, right? So that got us interested into the institutions of scholarships and access to such programs, right? Why must they be, when we talk about prestigious scholarships, why must they have such a high barrier of entry for a lot of students who may not come from wealthier backgrounds?
Is there a high barrier of entry?
It is. I think a few things, right? So the clearest example that people may believe is that we want to give scholarships to the best and brightest students who have worked the hardest to get the highest amount of A's or the highest amount of CGPA. The truth of the matter is, and this is true anecdotal experiences with our students, as well as I think even a lot of the research that has shown, is that academic performance is very much tied to the background that you come from. So the 6A of a student from Wong Kiara might be very much different from the 1A for a student from Kanawit in Sarawak, right? So we can't weigh them very fairly if we were to look at things on paper. So those are just a small example of how some of these invisible barriers may allow students to fall behind, right? So that got us interested in this idea of how, if we were to imagine scholarships, right, or access, and we are thinking about programs that are supposed to support students to grow and transform, how can you equip or build a program that appreciates this background, not only in terms of a charitable or needs analysis, but also in terms of appreciating it as a diverse strength, actually, that brings different perspective when we talk about nation building. What can students from such backgrounds offer on the table?
Yeah. Is this all resonating with you, Kuha? You are a Tunku Scholar. 2022 was when you were given the scholarship. So talk to me a little bit about how all the things that Ida has said maybe resonates with you, a bit about your journey and how you ended up applying for the scholarship.
Right, sure. So just a little bit of a background for myself. I come from Klang, born and raised, and I went to an all-girls school prior to going for SCPM before entering university. I come from a single-parent family, so my father passed away when I was 12, and my mother is a freelance tutor for primary school children, and I have a younger sister who just finished SPM actually. So in that sense, when I applied for the scholarship, it was while I was sitting for my SCPM exams, and during that time, I still remember during the duration of the applications, there were really a lot of issues that I personally faced because my housing area had an electrical outage on and off for the entire week, so I had difficulties accessing the portal and so on, and there were so many issues in doing that. So at that time, I really did face a lot of struggles, not just financially, but also in accessing the internet, going for classes and so on. And that really affected how I applied for a lot of different financial aids as well. So when I applied for the scholarship, I actually had to reach out to YTAR and be able to ask them, okay, I'm facing issues with the application portal. How am I going to submit the answers when, you know, it's not even working out with electric and all that kind of things? And they were able to give me support that I needed personally, and I emailed them the answers instead of applying through the portal itself.
Right.
So fast forward a few months later, after some interviews and all, I managed to get the scholarship and started pursuing my studies in University Malaya.
Okay, so when Ida said a bit earlier that one of the reasons why there is maybe there's perhaps limited understanding in terms of where to apply or how to apply. How did you learn about the fact that Yayasan TAR is offered scholarships? How did you know to go to the website to apply for a scholarship?
Actually, I knew about Yayasan TAR prior to entering STPM because I was searching for scholarships at that time after SPM. So I was always keeping an eye on how the applications were and who was applying. I really didn't know anyone at that time who did apply and get into the scholarship. But then so happened some of my friends, when I was sitting for STPM, they reached out to me and they said, hey, this looks like something that you would be interested in and you would suit. I think you should apply. And I didn't really have anyone other than my English teacher back in secondary school who actually helped me like prepare the essays, and so like, okay, this is okay. You know, you should perhaps talk about your experiences and, you know, show what you have to offer as well as your potential, because, you know, you deserve to be here. And
so it was very much your own initiative to look for, to apply for, all of that.
Yes, it was a very difficult process. People can recommend it to us, but then actually sitting down and applying is a whole different story, I think.
I can see the value that Closing the Gap brings in terms of support and mentorship and a bit of guidance for very young students who make that transition from secondary to tertiary. I see that there is a gap now that needs to be closed. I understand that you interviewed Kuha. Talk to me a little bit about, you talked about some of the principles of the ethos behind giving out these scholarships, but what are you looking for specifically? What qualities strike you about the applicants that you say, I think this is a winning scholar?
That's a great question. I think maybe before I begin with what we're looking for, I wanted to share a little bit about what we stopped looking for. So I think I mentioned before this, the scholarship had a history. There's a lot of prestige to it, which is great, right? It's tied to Tunku's legacy. But one thing that we felt like needed modernization was this idea that only students with first-class CGPA can apply for it, right? So one of the biggest thing that we did was we removed that entirely. So we have a no minimum CGPA to apply. So some of the students who have applied through has had below 3.0 CGPA. And there was a risk that we took. Sometimes we work with partners, because we work with partners who may want to set up scholarships, and they partner with us to run scholarship, like what AHAM has done with Kuha. So sometimes there's a bit of convincing that needs to be done.
It's like a controversial decision. Okay.
So interestingly enough, this particular student who had a CGPA of lower than 3.0, initially when we tabled the person, it was very interesting to see how the partners who were very aligned with what we're looking for could immediately look beyond the CGPA weakness, and to look beyond and look at the other aspects of the applications. So what consists in what happens in the other part of the application that we're looking for, right? Primarily, we're looking for students with the right values. And what we mean by that is, number one, is grit, right? And when we talk about grit, we want to be careful here and not try to have people assume that grit means someone who maybe have done 10 core activities or have led multiple clubs and associations, right? We want to broaden that to say that grit and leadership also looks like being the breadwinner for your family. It also means going to school if you have to, how to say this, row a boat to get to school. That's also grit and leadership. Grit and leadership is also about supporting your community, whether that be your village or even broader than that, right? So on one level, we're looking at personal grit, not just in co-curricular or formal education settings, but in your life in general. Number two, that's most important for us, is a value for service. And that's something that's very important for us. As much as our program is about development for students so that they can live and eventually pursue careers or pathways that they personally would enjoy and love, we also think it's important that we look for students who want to give back. Yeah. So giving back can be broad. It can be through your own career, could be through your side initiative. So one thing that we do in our program is that we no longer just give scholarship as a financial assistance. We do a 2-year leadership development program that is coupled with the scholarship as well. And students are required to also go through and run their own community projects, which Kuha also has to run as part of the program. And therefore, one of the ways we assess students, we no longer look at getting students, we no longer just look at students' academic performance throughout the scholarship process. We also look at how much they actually fulfill some of these other criteria around community projects, right? So we want to take a more holistic look at students. And the key thing for us, we were trying to look for that ability, that growth mindset, right? The ability to say, I want to try something new. And at the same time, I'm thinking about something that's beyond myself and thinking about those around me. So I think that's also really powerful, because once you look at it from that lens, more holistic lens, it makes it easier for students from different backgrounds to fit this criteria. It's no longer a very high bar to say that, oh, I need to speak English or speak a certain way for me to apply for this. So another thing that we do very consciously in our process is, number one, our application process is bilingual. So students have the choice of deciding they want to do it in English or Malay. Number two is our recruitment process as well. We do our best to do in various languages, from even Mandarin, Tamil, Bahasa Iban. We try to do it as much as possible.
Recruitment process?
Recruitment process. So I know it's very strange. We actively go out to recruit people to apply for our scholarship. The reason why we do that is because without recruitment, you generally will have a good pool of students, right? People want money and financial assistance.
They need scholarships, yes.
Yeah, so there's a national pool already, but we realize that there are certain students, so every year we have a target as well, internal target of underrepresented students or communities that are typically not represented in our community. So we do a post-mortem on our cohorts each year, and we're like, okay, we don't have enough students coming from Sabah, Sarawak, or we don't have enough students from the Orang Asli community. And typically, if you're working with students from such community, it's not enough to just put out a ad on newspapers saying that you're looking for scholars, right? So one of the things we do is we try to work closely with certain communities or certain associations that work with the community to try and identify potential students to apply for it. So my team actually calls people, cultivate certain people if they find that that's a great profile to support. One of them, I think, is a Viviona. I don't know if you remember a few years back. So when all the news came out, the first thing my team did was they went on the internet and tried to search for her and to call her up to be like, can you apply for this scholarship, because we think that you might fit what we're looking for. But beyond Viviona, we have one of the things that we're very excited is in the last 3 years, we've been slowly been able to increase the number of Orang Asli students that we support through our scholarship as well. And that's a very difficult endeavor, generally speaking, just because representation of Orang Asli students in higher education, it's still a big challenge anyway. Right. So that's a really small pool that you're already looking at, right? So these are the little efforts that the team has to make sure if we're really sincere about diversity, about socio-economic parity for the students that we serve. We try as best as possible to meet students where they're at, and hopefully get the kind of profile like Kuha to join us as well each year.
Wonderful. So Kuha, I think most people, when they think about scholarships, they think, oh, it's kind of monetary, financial aid. They think it's about money. But to hear that there is support, there's leadership training and guidance, and the opportunity to provide service or to return or give back to your community. How do you use all of that, leverage all of that wonderful support? Has it changed your trajectory? How are you thinking about rising to the challenge?
All right. So when I first entered university, I was actually really interested in doing law, but my UPU applications actually came back and offered me international and strategic studies. At the time when I entered into university, I was really lost on what to do and how to navigate this, because I've never, no one in my community has actually heard of that course before, international and strategic studies, right? It's a very bizarre thing. So
they'll be like, what will you do?
Exactly.
What job will you have?
How are you going to go work, right? So basically at that time, I was so lost on how to navigate and go through this, because it's such a new field, and at the time I didn't have anyone in my family who was also pursuing tertiary education before. So when Ida mentioned about the 2-year leadership program, it was actually a very interesting program that was able to help me reflect on myself, my abilities, and also build up the professional and personal skills that I needed to actually be able to navigate this. So for example, during our first leadership development session, we were able to reflect on our journey thus far as a person, and also how we've gotten to the point of where we're at. And that was enabled me to actually think about, okay, what is it that I'm really interested in doing, and how would I be able to connect it back to the degree that I'm taking. So after all those sessions, towards the end of the program, as Ida has mentioned, we are required to do a community project. And during that time, I actually decided to do a community project about empowering children through teaching them about children's rights. So the project is called Project 54, where I went to 2 foster homes in my district, Klang, where I taught them about children's rights, how to advocate for themselves, as well as how they are able to ensure that their rights are being upheld, and how to help other children as well. So right now, after the leadership development program, I graduated from the program in December last year. And even though I've graduated, I actually have a cohort of very amazing people who we are now working together with to build up an NGO that combines our projects to help underprivileged kids around Malaysia.
So one of the things that I think is such a rich pool of alumni that you have, talk to me about how, I mean, you've essentially hand-selected these future leaders. You've guided them and kind of groomed them along the way, invested all this leadership qualities in them. What do you do with this wonderful pool of talented young people who can shape the future of the country?
Do you want to share a little bit about
that? Yes, of
course. So we have an alumni association called Tunku Scholars Association Malaysia. So in there, we have this entire connected cohorts from the first Tunku Scholars all the way up to the current Tunku Scholars. And basically what we do within the Tunku Scholars Alumni Association is that we work towards nation building. So we are going to be doing a wide range of programs and also initiatives in which we're not just going to be connecting amongst the alumni, but we're also going to try to give back. So basically what we've been doing so far as scholars, we want to bring that out and be able to expand and upscale all these community efforts to be better able to serve our communities in Malaysia better.
Yes. Wow,
yeah,
the potential.
Yes, so one of the exciting things that she mentioned, right, and I've mentioned just now, is that although this new direction may have started in 2019, the scholarship has gone back way back to 2007, right? So you do have a cohort or a existing batch of students who are alumni, more like, some of them are older than me, doing incredible things, right? And that's something that we need to harness further. So that's actually also a focus that we want to take as we go into our 59th year of the foundation and moving forward, is really trying to dig in our heels a little bit more into alumni engagement, right? How do we connect now the alumni of the old and the alumni of the new? And when we say nation building, what are some of the causes of that is closest to the heart of our alumni?
Because there's something called Kita Mereka Malaysia that's really at the heart of the foundation. What is that? What is the vision of Kita Mereka Malaysia?
Thanks for asking that. So this Saturday, so the 8th of February, is actually Tunku's birthday or birthday anniversary. So if anyone would have known this fact, he would know he would have turned 122 years old, I believe, this year.
122.
Right, if he was still alive today. So since the foundation was set up in his honor, one of the things that we are doing and that's happening this Friday is we usually have an event to both commemorate Tunku's legacy, to also celebrate the partnerships that we have with various private stakeholders who have supported the program and have given funds for the programs for the last 5 or 6 years. And the theme for our program for this year is called Kita Mereka Malaysia for 2 reasons. Number one is to acknowledge that a lot of what Malaysia is today or Malaysia aspires to be is pretty much shaped by the people who came before this, so people who have Mereka Malaysia before this. And the second thing is to think about what roles do we play to support and transform Malaysia for the years to come. And years to come could be in the next 5 to 10 years, but specifically for us, it's also thinking ahead for our 60th anniversary next year.
Yes,
right?
a big one. It's
a
big
one,
milestone.
Right,
yes.
so a big one. We've been around for 60 years and we've done a lot. And like you said, probably a lot more that can be done in terms of getting people to know about the work that we do, right? So we're also thinking very much in the next year, what are we trying to achieve, right? So personally, for the foundation, we want to focus on, number one, thinking about how do we ramp up our partnership for 2 reasons, right? Number one is our program can expand as far as we can find partnerships to join us on this journey. So we're looking to expand and be able to give up to 60 more scholarships by the end of 2026. So looking for partnerships to allow us to make that happen. And number two is to scale the impact that we do. So we don't just do scholarships, right? We do Closing the Gap. We do various other employability programs with various partners that we have. And so we are thinking about how do we scale our programs beyond that. So if previously we were targeting and working with about 26 students per year, with the transition from 2019 onwards, we started working with about 150 students per year. By the end of this year, we aim to start raising that up to 700 students per year. So that's an ambitious goal that we are looking forward to achieving by the 60th anniversary next year. But that's for us, right? But broadly speaking, I think in terms of the ethos of it, it's really trying to get everyone to really think about the foundations and the original aspirations of Tunku when we think about Malaysia, right? A lot about the Malaysia that he dreamt for is a Malaysia that's compassionate, a Malaysia that has liberty and justice, and you cannot have justice without equity. And so a big message that we understand as a foundation as well is about how equity should lie at the heart of a lot of the work that we do in nation building. And if we are sincere about nation building, a nation can only go as far as its youth, right? So I think even today the World Bank just announced or launched a report on inequality, right? If you look at the state of inequality, you can tell that I think it's 60% of income inequality in Malaysia is attributed to a inequality in opportunities, and inequality of opportunities that happens throughout one's life, and it impacts a lot of our young people the most, right? So you look at also underemployment or unemployment of youth that is significantly higher than the national average rate of unemployment, right? And that's why for us, youth is such a powerful group of people that we must work with. And equity lies at the answer for this for us. And that's a message that we kind of want to send through this theme as well on Kita Mereka Malaysia.
That's wonderful. I have to ask you, Kuha, for anyone watching today or for anyone even considering that they could maybe apply for a Tunku scholarship but feel intimidated or unsure, hesitant, what would you say to them?
All right. I think mainly when people are applying for scholarships or any opportunities for the matter, you always think that you're not deserving of it or that you're not confident enough, you don't meet the requirements and all. I think, at least for the Tunku scholarship, you don't need to worry about that. It's not about figuring out what you are prior to applying. I think I discovered a lot about myself even while I was applying for it. So you don't need to have things figured out prior to applying for the scholarship. It's more important that you really sit down and think about, yourself, what are your goals, how you can serve the community better, and really link what you want to do with what you can do. And through that, just talk to some people about it. I think the team at Yayasan Tunku Abdul Rahman has always been very helpful and open, and also a lot of my own scholar mates as well. We've always been open to sharing about our experiences and how it would be able to, you know, connect to them. We all come from various different backgrounds, and there's no one mold that we all need to fit in as scholars. So I think the most important thing is just to sit down and submit the application.
Just do it!
Just do it.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show, both of you. It's been such a joy talking to you both. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's all we have for you on this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris, signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching.